Good morning, everyone. And it's a beautiful morning, isn't it? It's a beautiful fall morning. It's great to be in New York. It's great to be an American today. Now, that may sound a little discordant given the events over the last couple of days. And fully half of the country thinks that we're going to hell. But I assure you, our republic will survive. And the reason I can have that kind of confidence is because I'm thinking long term. You know, last year I stood in front of this conference and talked about, the information revolution, how the invention of the printing press allowed society to move from thinking just day to day to conveying information to broad spaces and to new generations. That allowed us to start thinking for the long term. But as we've started that march towards ever greater availability of information, we of course have had we've created a glut. And this has actually encouraged more short-term thinking. It's really our responsibility to swing the pendulum back towards a long-term mindset. History is littered with CEOs who didn't think for the long term and were victims of creative destruction. I worry about that personally myself, to be perfectly honest. We all have a vested interest in our companies remaining relevant, of course. But we also have a responsibility to use innovation to drive our companies forward, our customers forward, but increase standards of living and push society forward. And I think at the bedrock of all of our minds is that whatever we do in our companies, it's because we have a mission that makes the world a better place because of what we're doing. And we have to think long term if we're going to be successful with that. The problem, of course, is CEOs have only a short time to think about the long term. The median S&P 500 CEO is in the seat for about 6 years. And yet, of course, the horizons that I'm talking about are much longer than that. So you have to ask yourself every day, what are you doing to think about the long term? What are you doing to create a legacy that lasts beyond your tenure in the seat? The great speakers we have on the roster today, of course, have to balance short-term commercial imperatives with long-term thinking and innovation. One example will be our next speaker from the NFL, where, of course, they want to create an exciting game to keep the ratings up. But recently, safety concerns and health problems are actually threatening the long-term viability of some professional sports. The 24-hour news cycle is something that we've all bemoaned about. In the primary season, half of voters reported getting most of their information about the campaign from social media, primarily Facebook. So many people get their information about the news from watching YouTube clips of last night's comedy news shows. Now, that's not news. It's funny, but it certainly doesn't encourage critical thinking. Now, my industry falls prey to this problem, certainly. Investors know that long-term investment planning is better. You'll get better investment results by having a plan and sticking to it. Yet that's not what we do. And when I say we, I also mean probably many of you. The temptation to get in there and muck around with your investment portfolio because, oh my God, the Dow's down 700 points because of the election. What am I going to do? You don't have to do anything, and probably doing something is bad, because what would have happened yesterday had you come in and sold on the open? You would have been a chump because the markets finished up. So again, nevertheless, investors fall prey to that. People, want to wait for some sort of certainty before they make an investment decision, but of course, certainty will never come. To go back to that election, half of the country is sure bad things are coming. But hating the government is a bad investment strategy. Indeed, presidential popularity isn't required for the markets to do good. The S&P 500 has done better when the president's popularity rating is below 50% than when the president's popularity rating has been above 50%. So at my company, Oppenheimer Funds, we of course want to sell investors what they want, But we also have a duty to educate people about the perils of short-term thinking, encourage long-term thinking, and provide investment solutions that are built for long-term results. So our managers, they're human. They're subject to the same behavioral biases that all of us have, but we spend a lot of time consciously trying to avoid thinking about, oh, what am I going to do because of the election? What am I going to do because of the next Fed meeting? But instead, let's think about what 2025 is going to look like and structure our portfolios around that. And that's why we pay our portfolio managers on their long-term performance. It's why the philanthropic and community outreach at my company is centered around financial and math literacy to prepare the next generation to make good choices about financial responsibility and to create people who are prepared for the jobs of the future. The best time to be alive is right now. A lot of people hate when I say that because they prefer to focus on all of the terrible things that are there. But life expectancies are getting longer. Living standards are rising. Global poverty is falling. Now, all of this didn't happen because we just focused on short-term issues and needs. It's because there were innovators out there, and you'll hear from many of them today. There are innovators out there who have thought for the long term and had a fundamentally optimistic view. The world creates new opportunities all the time that will pay off for society and for investors. So again, you could pull in and focus on the problems that would prevent you from doing something, but I'm an optimist. I'm an investor. I have to be. As an investor, you have to be an optimist. And history has shown over and over again that that is a better perspective to have. We will cure debilitating diseases. We will invent new sustainable energy sources. We will create robotics and AI that raise living standards for the whole world. But it will happen by thinking beyond the next 4-year presidential cycle. That's what it's going to take. One of my favorite quotes is from the Saudi oil minister back in the 1970s, Sheikh Yamani. You probably know this one. In the throes of the first oil embargo, he was rather prescient. He said, the Stone Age didn't end because we ran out of stones. And he knew that the Saudi nation, if it was to survive, could not look to oil for its long-term prosperity. And you see how that is coming true today. Again, that's an example of long-term thinking. I challenge my leadership team to ask the question, will Oppenheimer be a mutual fund company in 10 years? It may not be. We have to think bigger about what we're going to do. So, we have an incredible lineup of speakers here, as I've said, and each one of those individuals is faced with that challenge. Thinking long-term, if they are going to create an enduring legacy, if their company will survive beyond the next several years, they have to think about how different the world might look in the future. So that's all very exciting, and that's why Oppenheimer Funds is proud to partner with Andrew Ross Sorkin and the New York Times to sponsor this conference. Thank you for giving me a few minutes of your time today, and enjoy the rest of the conference.